Hello and welcome back to the History of the Mongols. I'm your host Kyle. In today's episode, we delve into the sophisticated strategies and enduring legacy of Genghis Khan as he laid the foundation of the Mongol Empire. We will explore his efforts to consolidate power, implement innovative governance, and address the challenges of tribal unity, alongside the pivotal military campaigns that expanded Mongol influence. Join us as we examine the methods, triumphs, and complexities of this unparalleled historical figure. Before we get started, I just want to address something before any comments come flooding in to correct me about how to say the name Genghis Khan. The name has quite a few pronunciations. Genghis, Chinggis, Genghis, and depending on language and history, they're all acceptable. So I'll mostly be using the Genghis Khan version, but again, all of them are acceptable. Before delving into the initial Mongol incursion into the Tangut, it is imperative to contextualize the preceding developments. When last examined, Genghis Khan had successfully consolidated the Mongol tribes, culminating in the formal establishment of the Mongol Empire in 1206. At approximately 50 years of age, Genghis had endured a lifetime of relentless struggle, seizing hard-won victories interspersed with bitter defeats. He had acquired profound insights, not only from his own errors, but also from those committed by his adversaries. However, despite the establishment of the Mongol state, its structure remained fragile. Tribal confederations historically lacked longevity, compelling Genghis Khan to devise strategies to forestall any resurgence of tribal discord that could fracture his nascent empire. To mitigate this risk, Genghis Khan implemented a series of transformative strategies aimed at dismantling the entrenched powers of traditional chiefs and khans. Central to this reform was the realignment of loyalty, now directed solely towards the Great Khan. Those leaders who exhibited resistance were systematically removed, thereby neutralizing potential nuclei of opposition. Moreover, the traditional tribal structures were disbanded, with families integrated among Genghis' own people, thereby consolidating unity. This restructuring was formalized through the extension of the decimal military system to the entire populace, effectuating a comprehensive social reorganization. The decimal system, referenced frequently, merits further elaboration. It was predicated on the organization of groups into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, denoted respectively in Mongolian as Arban, Jagun, Minghan, and Tumen. These units transcended tribal affiliations, merging individuals from diverse backgrounds into the same Minghan, thereby supplanting traditional kinship-based social structures with a uniform military administrative framework. In tandem with the military Minghans, civilian Minghans were instituted to sustain the martial apparatus. These civilian units were tasked with the production, maintenance, and provisioning of military equipment and, in the absence of warriors, oversaw the pastoral economy, including the management of livestock. Consequently, tribal identities such as Taichud, Tatar, Keriot, or Naiman were subsumed under a singular Mongol identity. Only a select few tribes that demonstrated unwavering allegiance retained their integrity and leadership, but even they acknowledged the absolute supremacy of Genghis Khan, epitomizing the dictum, "There shall be no Khan but the Khan himself." Simultaneously, Genghis Khan promulgated a singular codex, the Great Yassa, to supersede the disparate legal traditions of the constituent tribes. The Yassa functioned as a codified legal system, standardizing customary practices while prohibiting behaviors deemed sacrilegious or antagonistic to the spiritual equilibrium essential for the state's prosperity. Infringements, however, seemingly benign, such as washing soiled items in flowing water, inserting a knife into fire, or urinating on ashes, were met with capital punishment, as these acts were believed to disrupt spiritual harmony. This stringent enforcement of spiritual etiquette was paramount during a period when divine favour was deemed vital for the empire's survival. Notably, capital punishment remained a prevalent sanction within the Yassa, reinforcing the perception of Genghis Khan's resolve in its application. The Yassa also prescribed precise methods of animal slaughter, mandating that the heart be crushed without bloodshed, a practice at odds with Islamic ritual slaughter, which necessitates bloodletting. This dichotomy provokes ongoing scholarly debate regarding the Yassa's applicability to sedentary populations and the extent of its enforcement in diverse socio-cultural contexts. These ambiguities highlight the complex intersection between nomadic governance and religious heterogeneity, a theme warranting further exploration as our narrative unfolds. To facilitate the governance of the Mongol Empire, Genghis Khan undertook the establishment of a nascent administrative apparatus. Although modest in scale when juxtaposed with the sprawling bureaucratic frameworks of contemporaneous China, this rudimentary system was indispensable for overseeing a polity encompassing approximately 1 million individuals and an army numbering around 100,000. Following the subjugation of the Naiman, Genghis acquired their Uyghur scribes, recognizing the strategic utility of literacy. At that time, the Mongolian language lacked a written script, prompting Genghis Khan to adopt the Uyghur alphabet, which continues to persist in Inner Mongolia today. One of Genghis's adopted sons, Shigi Kutuku, a Tatar, was appointed as the Yeke Jarguchi, or chief judge, tasked with adjudicating legal matters, preserving justice, and chronicling both the Khan's edicts and judicial decisions in this new script. A significant augmentation of the burgeoning administration involved expanding the Keshig to 10,000 men. Initially established in 1204 as a personal guard for the Khan, the Keshig transcended mere protection duties. Its members served as grooms, meal preparers, caretakers of the Khan's ger, and overseers of his livestock, armaments, and even musical instruments. Comprised of trusted individuals, often the progeny of commanders or allied chieftains, the Keshig functioned akin to a military academy, fostering the development of leadership competencies. Those who proved adept were entrusted with commanding armies or governing territories. The Keshig also served as a political instrument. Members dispatched back to their homelands often acted as intermediaries, reinforcing the Khan's influence and ensuring the loyalty of their kin. Consequently, the Keshig represented both a means of fostering elite leadership and a mechanism of political consolidation. These strategic measures fortified the core military values prized by the Mongols: loyalty and discipline. The Mongol command structure, particularly the decimal system, demanded unwavering trust among commanders, essential for the operational fluidity of Mongol warfare. Armies often operated across vast distances, necessitating precise coordination to encircle and neutralize adversaries. Such operational autonomy underscores the institutional loyalty embedded within the Mongol hierarchy. Even when the Khan campaigned on distant fronts, his commanders maintained allegiance and executed his directives, contributing to the empire's expansion. By eliminating potential allegiances that might undermine the Khan's authority and rewarding demonstrated competence, the Great Khans cultivated a resilient and reliable military apparatus. Soldiers demonstrated remarkable dedication, often enduring severe hardships without complaint. Their loyalty reinforced by a reciprocal relationship wherein the Khan ensured the well-being of their families. Instances of defection among Mongol forces during the period of imperial consolidation were exceedingly rare, consistently noted by foreign chroniclers who marvelled at the Mongols' steadfastness. Any potential threats to this consolidation were expeditiously neutralized. One prominent instance involved Kokochu, also known as Teb Tengari, a shaman and Genghis Khan's stepbrother. Renowned for his purported spiritual prowess, allegedly capable of traversing snowstorms unclothed, Kokochu had earned considerable reverence. According to one account, It was Kokotchu who conferred the title of Genghis Khan upon Temujin in 1206. However, emboldened by his perceived spiritual authority, Kokotchu assaulted Genghis' brothers, overstepping his bounds. In response, Genghis permitted his youngest brother to incapacitate the shaman, leaving him to perish, an unequivocal demonstration that no spiritual figure, regardless of perceived power, would be tolerated as a challenge to the Great Khan's supremacy. These measures established a degree of internal control within Genghis Khan's nascent polity, yet the stability of his state remained tenuous. Numerous adversaries or their descendants had survived the arduous wars of unification. Among them were Toktoa Beki of the Merkit and his progeny, Buiruk Khan of the Naiman and his nephew Kuchlug, as well as Sengum Ilka, the son of the late Ong Khan of the Kerayit. Of particular concern were the heirs of the Naiman and Kerayit factions, as the Jin dynasty in the south could potentially endorse them as alternative leaders, thereby galvanizing residual dissident factions against Genghis Khan. In the years immediately following unification in 1206, it became imperative for Genghis to preempt any resurgence of opposition. Buiruk was decisively defeated in late 1206, forcing the remaining Naiman, now led by Kuchlug, to migrate westward and ally with the Merkit under Toktoa along the Irtysh River, where they faced defeat in 1208. Toktoa perished in combat, while his sons sought refuge among the Kipchak tribes in the far west. Kuchlug, on the other hand, would eventually find sanctuary in the Kara Kitai, where he would later seize power in 1211, a development we will revisit in a subsequent episode. To the north, Genghis Khan compelled the submission of various Siberian forest tribes around Lake Baikal in 1207, including the Kyrgyz, the Tumed, and the Oirat, among others. By 1208, Genghis had successfully secured both his northern and western frontiers, with his eastern boundary naturally demarcated by the Khingan Mountains, leaving the southern territories of China as the next strategic objective. While these efforts to consolidate an administrative framework and eliminate potential rivals fortified his rule, Genghis Khan remained acutely aware that idleness among his warriors could foster internal discord. Genghis recognized that the Mongols required a unifying external threat to channel their martial vigor. Engaging in campaigns not only served this strategic function, but also addressed pragmatic concerns. The environmental conditions of late 12th century Mongolia, characterized by increased aridity and desertification, exacerbated by protracted conflict, had significantly depleted livestock numbers. A military expedition against China promised both material replenishment and the fulfillment of the Khan's role as a provider. Ideologically, the campaign against the Jin also reinforced Genghis Khan's political legitimacy, rooted partly in his association with the Khamag-Mongol Union of the early 12th century, which had been dismantled by the Jurchen Jin. The brutal execution of Khan Ambagai by the Jin demanded retribution, presenting Genghis with an opportunity to fulfill his duty as avenger. Furthermore, although the Jin dynasty was temporarily preoccupied with internal uprisings, flooding, and conflict with the southern Song dynasty, it would inevitably challenge a consolidated Mongol presence on its northern periphery. Perceiving Genghis Khan as a vassal, the Jin's acquiescence was unlikely, rendering a preemptive strike advantageous. It is crucial to emphasize that, at this juncture, the Mongols did not conceptualize world domination. Even the prospect of fully subjugating China had not yet crystallized as a strategic objective. The two kingdoms the Mongols faced at the outset was the Jurchen Jin Empire, its capital at Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing, which controlled a huge stretch of territory from the Ordos Loop to the far east of Manchuria. Ruled by the Jurchen, a semi-nomadic people originally from Manchuria, it was certainly the strongest single military force in the world at this point, with a population of about 40 million, mainly Chinese but a notable Jurchen and Khitan minority. Genghis Khan would have considered them the single greatest foe he faced. To the west of the Jin dynasty, in the Gansu corridor, was the back door to North China, the Xia dynasty, or the Tangut Kingdom. Considerably smaller in both population, geographic size, and in its military, it was a stout kingdom ruled by a people of Tibetan heritage, with a mixed population of Turkic nomads, sedentary Chinese, and Uyghurs. Much of it was covered by desert and mountain, its major cities huddled along the Yellow River, west of the Ordos Desert. Controlling the Gansu corridor, the narrow strip between the Gobi Desert and Mongolia in the north, and the offshoots of the Himalayas to the south, most of the overland trade routes, the silk routes, were funneled through here, increasing the wealth of the kingdom substantially. It was here the hammer would fall first. The first Mongol raids into the Tangut realm were in 1205, pursuing the fleeing Karaite prince Sengum Ilkha. The Sengum evaded them, as he had been chased out by the Tangut, and was then murdered shortly afterwards in the Tarim Basin. The Mongols made due with captured animals and goods before withdrawing. In 1207, the Mongols returned to the Tangut, a more serious probe this time, taking advantage of the first coup d'état in the Xixia's history and the ascension of the new King Weiming Anquan. Tangut garrisons were sent out to meet the raiders and were destroyed, and the border fort of Wulahai was sacked and occupied until early 1208. The new Tangut king looked to the Jin, their nominal overlords, for aid, but in the winter of 1208, the Jin emperor had died and was succeeded by his uncle, Wanyan Yongji. History does not look kindly on him. So poor was his reign that his successor posthumously demoted him from emperor to prince, and hence, instead of emperor, sources call him the Wei Shao Wang, the Prince of Wei. To give you an idea of his character, his helpful response to the Mongol attacks on the Tangut was allegedly to say, "It is to our advantage when our enemies attack one another. Wherein lies the danger to us? How could a man who tempts fate so willingly have been a poor emperor?" By autumn 1209, Genghis Khan was ready for more serious actions, his flanks now secured with the defeat of the Naiman Merkit force on the Irtish in the west, the submission of the forest tribes to his north, and the voluntary submission of the Uyghurs, the neighbours of the Tangut. In 1209, the Mongol conquests were to begin. The Mongols marched in spring 1209, when there would be sufficient water and sparse grasses to allow the perhaps 60,000-man army to cross the Gobi Desert. The Tangut armies, generally Turkic and Tangut horse archers and lancers, supported by Chinese infantry, fared poorly against Genghis, who personally led the invasion. His disciplined army in the open proved itself almost immediately. Made strong by their hard lives, at a strategic level, the army moved swiftly, effectively, and without complaint. Honed and sharpened by decades of continuous war, at the tactical level, they were a storm, outmaneuvering and surrounding their enemies on the field. Their arrows flying far, hitting hard and striking true. Thousands of arrows would rise into the sky like a cloud, dropping like rain, and suddenly releasing cries of anguish from an army of dying men and horses. Wings of the Mongol army, separated by kilometers, but kept in touch through messengers, signal arrows, flags and drums, seemed to move as one to surround their foe, or, in their units of 10, 100 or 1,000, sent to run against the enemy, appearing like an undisciplined horde before suddenly forming into a wall of unyielding cavalry, or swiftly wheeling about, turning in their saddles to send arrows behind them, tempting the foe to pursue. Often they took the bait, charging the Mongol archers, who parted, the impetus of the enemy charge leading into nothing. Isolated, these horsemen were quickly surrounded, filled with arrows, or crushed by the Mongols' own lancers. The enemy infantry without cavalry support could be then almost contemptuously picked off, like a wolf among a flock of sheep. Genghis Khan initiated his campaign by advancing toward Wulahai, decisively annihilating a Tangut force dispatched to intercept him. Shortly thereafter, the fort fell once more under Mongol control. Proceeding south along the Yellow River, the Mongols confronted the natural barrier of the Highland Mountains, which served as a protective shield from the west to the north of the Tangut capital. Zhongxing, modern Yinchuan, nestled within its agriculturally rich valley. On the capital's eastern flank, the Yellow River and its intricate network of irrigation canals formed an additional line of defense, sustaining the life and economy of the Tangut heartland. The primary approach through the Helan Shan was guarded by the fortified post of Keimin, strategically reinforced following the fall of Wulahai and commanded by an imperial prince. Initially, the Mongol vanguard faced repulsion. However, upon the arrival of the main Mongol force, the Tangut defenders opted to remain entrenched behind their fortifications. For 2 months, the Mongols maintained their position outside the fort, unable to compel the Tangut garrison to engage. Amid the oppressive summer heat, Genghis Khan employed a strategic ruse, feigning a retreat to entice the defenders out. Once the garrison pursued, the full force of the Mongol army encircled and overwhelmed them, compelling Keimin to capitulate shortly thereafter. Upon descending from the Helan Mountains, Genghis Khan found himself confronting the formidable fortifications of Zhongxing. The city's thick stamped earth walls, interspersed with robust towers and protected by the irrigation canals, rendered a direct assault nearly impossible. Without adequate siege equipment, the Mongols resorted to pillaging the surrounding countryside, yet Zhongxing remained unbroken. In the autumn of 1209, nature intervened. Seasonal rains swelled the Yellow River. Seizing this opportunity, Genghis Khan ordered his forces to construct a makeshift dike, diverting the surging waters toward the city. The resulting deluge destabilized the earthen walls, inundated homes, and threatened the populace with disease, all while the siege's hardships of hunger and fatigue eroded Tangut morale. Ironically, the dike itself eventually failed, flooding the Mongol encampment, but by then, the psychological damage to Zhongxing was irreversible. In January 1210, the Tangut court, recognizing the inevitability of defeat, initiated peace negotiations. As part of the resulting treaty, the humiliated Tangut Kingdom accepted vassal status under Mongol suzerainty. Genghis Khan secured a Tangut princess as a consort, alongside substantial tribute consisting of falcons, camels, and textiles. In early 1210, Genghis Khan returned to Mongolia, vindicated by his successful campaign. Shortly thereafter, Tangut King Waiming Anqun died under suspicious circumstances, marking a symbolic end to the first Mongol conquest. While the Mongols encountered significant challenges when faced with fortified cities, their adaptability and tactical ingenuity in open-field engagements proved decisive. Although they lacked a reliable method for capturing well-defended settlements, the Mongols demonstrated a capacity to lure garrisons into the open, exploiting the defenders' misconceptions of weakness. Compared to subsequent Mongol conquests, the Tangut submission was comparatively lenient. The tribute demanded, though substantial, was not ruinous, and the Mongols refrained from establishing a permanent military presence within the kingdom. Tangut autonomy remained largely intact, except for obligations to provide military support and tribute. Nonetheless, discontent simmered within the Tangut court, where factions persistently advocated for resistance. This internal discord would ultimately precipitate the kingdom's downfall, a consequence not of direct Mongol domination, but of internal strife catalyzed by the uneasy vassalage. Upon his return to Mongolia, Genghis Khan received emissaries from the Jin court, bearing news of the enthronement of Wanyan Yongji as the new Jin emperor. The envoys also sought to reaffirm Genghis Khan's obligations as a tributary, harking back to the political dynamics established in 1196 when Genghis had engaged in military action against the Tatar tribes with Jin support. At that time, the Jin viewed him as a subordinate, and it is likely that Genghis had initially sent gifts or tribute to the Jin in acknowledgement of this status. However, by approximately 1206, he had ceased this practice. In 1208, the Jin Emperor Zhangzong had dispatched his uncle, Wanyan Yongji, to re-establish the tributary relationship. But Genghis, perceiving Yongji as unimposing, had responded with overt disdain. Now in 1210, upon learning of Yongji's accession to the throne, Genghis Khan's reaction was one of irreverent amusement. Customarily, he was expected to perform the kowtow to acknowledge the new emperor. Instead, Genghis openly derided the notion, spitting on the ground towards the south, the symbolic direction of the Jin court, and remarked, "I thought that the ruler of the Middle Kingdom must be from heaven. Can he be a person of such weakness as Wei Xiao Wang? Why should I kowtow for him?" He then mounted his horse and rode away, a gesture laden with symbolic repudiation. This act of defiance effectively constituted a declaration of war, marking the inception of a protracted conflict that would endure for 2 decades, far exceeding the lifespans of both Genghis Khan and the Jin Emperor Wanyan Yongji. The audacious rejection of Jin authority not only demonstrated Genghis Khan's resolute autonomy, but also set the stage for a series of campaigns that would irrevocably alter the political landscape of East Asia. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the History of the Mongols. Please like the video and leave a comment, as it helps greatly, and subscribe if you want to hear more. Thank you, and see you all next time.